let's get rolling. We're kicking off the morning with a wide-angle lens on the state of cancer research and care. Here to talk about the future, please welcome Laurie Glimcher. She is President and CEO of the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. Laurie. And here to lead the conversation is the host of WNYC's All of It, Alison Stewart.
Hi, Margaret. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So, Dr. Glimcher, it's hard to believe that we're going to wrap up a decade in about 6 or 7 weeks. So, how is living with cancer today at the end of this decade different than it was 10 years ago?
It is vastly different. It is vastly different. As you just heard, there have been revolutionary discoveries in cancer over the last decade to 2 decades, to the point where patients who have presented with widespread melanoma, it's a skin cancer, who invariably died within a short time, 20% of those people are still alive today thanks to immunotherapy. I consider that a major advance. And there are patients who have lung cancer, who presented with widespread disease, who also are still alive 7 years later because they got a drug that targets the specific genetic mutation that's driving their cancer, that's responsible for turning a normal cell into a cancer cell. But we're just at the tip of the iceberg in immunotherapy and in precision genomics. We have a long ways to go, but I happen to be very optimistic about the next decade. So I think that for many years, survival rates did not change. They were flat. But starting about 20, 25 years ago, the mortality rate for cancer has dropped about 25%. I think that is measurable success. And some of that is due to changes in behavior, in lifestyle, cessation of smoking, and increased fitness, exercise, being more attentive to one's diet, because what you put inside can change the microbiome in your gut, and certain of those species in your gut are associated with cancer. So it's certainly partly lifestyle choices, but it is also these new medicines that are now available for treating patients with cancer.
Let me take it back almost 50 years, when President Nixon declared a war on cancer in December of '71. Since that time, what has remained horribly stubborn and difficult?
At that point, all we could offer patients, if they presented in stage 1, where their cancer hadn't spread, very, very good chance of being cured, because you could cut it out, and then you could use radiation or chemotherapy, and those patients did well. But that's only about 25% of patients who present with stage 1 cancer. There are cancers that are very silent. Ovarian cancer is a good example of that. Pancreatic cancer is a good example of that. People don't realize they're ill and that something's wrong until the cancer has spread widely. And if you present with metastatic cancer, we can only help, perhaps half of those patients. So we have a long ways to go, but as I said, we have now some apparent cures for a number of diseases, because of the 75 cancer drugs that have been approved over the last couple of years, Dana-Farber Cancer Institute has their fingerprints all over those drugs. And that's because Dana-Farber, to me, is a very unique place. It's a very unique place because we have 50% of our faculty are doing research and 50% are taking care of patients at the bedside. So we make these brilliant discoveries in research that then can get translated into new drugs at Dana-Farber or in partnership with a pharmaceutical company or a biotech company. So we have founded over 40 biotech companies just in the last decade, and most of them are still alive and thriving. And I do want to give you an example of how unique the environment at Dana-Farber is. I mean, we're a dedicated cancer hospital. All we do is think about cancer. Our mission is cancer. And everybody at Dana-Farber, from the parking attendants to the janitors to the nutritionists to the doctors, really buys into that mission. So our research scientists interact flawlessly with our clinicians, and most of our clinicians are doing clinical trials. We do over 1,000 clinical trials at Dana-Farber, many of them in the very early space, testing out potential new drugs. We can match patients who come to us into clinical trials very easily. If there is a clinical trial available, Dana-Farber patients will be put on that clinical trial if there are no other options. And I think that's very special, and is, a great example of that is our recent Nobel Prize winner in medicine, Dr. Bill Kalin. And Bill came to the Dana-Farber as a fellow. He had an MD, he didn't have a PhD, and he worked in the laboratory of a distinguished scientist for a few years, and then he set up his own lab, and he asked a very simple, basic science, fundamental science question. He asked, how do cells sense oxygen? We know oxygen is vital for us. Too much of it isn't good, too little isn't good. But nobody understood how cells sensed oxygen. And so he figured out that puzzle over the next 2 decades, and was awarded the Nobel Prize for doing so, along with 2 collaborators. But Bill didn't stop there, because cancer cells are hogs. They suck up all the oxygen in the environment. They suck up all the nutrients in the environment. And that cancer is situated in one place, or many places, and it's surrounded by your immune cells that need to be activated. They need to be killing the cancer cells. But the tumor takes all the oxygen and all the nutrients away from those killer immune cells. So Bill went on to, with help from our clinicians and our wonderful chemical biologists, to start working on a drug that would target the proteins he had discovered. And that drug is FDA approved now. So he went from bench to bedside, and that's because our clinicians, whenever they see a patient who's unusual, they call for the help of our researchers.
Dr. Glimcher, it sounds like this is a specific kind of culture at Dana-Farber. How do you create that culture? How can that culture be replicated?
I think that what underlies that culture, and I have never seen a culture like this in any other place I've been, is based on collaboration rather than competition. I mean, why do we get up in the morning and work such long hours and work through the weekend? Why do our clinicians, why are they always on call? Why are our researchers in the lab over the weekend? It's because we are dedicated to reducing the burden of cancer around the world. That is our mission. And so why waste time being competitive? Why don't we just all work together? So we do. We work together with many other cancer centers. We share all of our data. We deposit our genomic data in a consortium so that it's available to everybody. Because we want to cure some cancers and make other cancers manageable diseases. And it takes more than just one cancer institute to do that. So I've always, and that is the special sauce at Dana-Farber. You see senior, accomplished researchers saying to junior researchers, listen, why don't you put your name first on this paper? That'll be better for your career. I don't care. I've already had many papers, so you take it on. It's that generosity of spirit. And then, when I get up in the morning, what inspires me the most are the patients. I've been at a number of institutions, and I have received probably 300 letters or emails from patients over the last 3 years. And usually when a patient emails the CEO, they're going to make a complaint. You know, I didn't really like my treatment here or there. I have almost never had a negative letter. I have been deluged with letters from patients who say, you know, we have never experienced care like this before, where everybody from the parking attendant who opens the car door and helps us get to the place we're going to be, to the nutritionists, to the volunteers, to the physicians and nurses, you form a team. You're a family, and you take care of us. Soon after I got there, I had a woman come up to me in a reception, and she said, are you Dr. Glimcher? And I said, yes, I am. And she said, well, I have a question for you. She said, you know, I've just been told that my breast cancer has been cured. I'm so grateful for that. And I don't need to come back to Dana-Farber anymore. But would it be okay if I just stop by a few times, because I have a family there, and I want to see them again?
Dr. Glimcher, I want to make sure we leave time for some questions. We've got one coming up on Slido in just a minute. I do want to ask one of you, because we are in a political year, is there a political leader that you think is really leading in this field? Is there some policy that you have heard? Is there some person running for office or currently in office you think is a real leader in this issue?
Well, I'm a little biased here, and I think I don't want to necessarily answer that question. I do think we need to be moderate. Okay, we can't throw the baby out with the bath. So I will just tell you that my son, Jake Auchincloss, is running for Joe Kennedy's seat in the House in Massachusetts. And Jake is a veteran. He served in Afghanistan after graduating from Harvard. He went to Marine Officer Candidate School and came back after 4 years. He was in Helmand Province, commanding a fleet of light armored reconnaissance vehicles. That was not exactly a restful time for me. And he came back after 4 years. He had been in the Special Forces, came back and went to business school, and then went into the private sector. So he really kind of gets it.
What did you mean you say don't throw the baby out with the bathwater specifically? What's an example? You said don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
We want people to have we want everybody to have access to all the wonderful drugs that are being developed, and we have many, many more to be developed. I don't think anybody would disagree with the lack of equity that we have in terms of access. At Dana-Farber, we see everybody. Everybody who walks across our door gets their tumor sequenced if they want to, and we pay for that from philanthropy, because the health insurance companies will not reimburse you for that. On the other hand, there are people who are very happy with the insurance they have. 150 million people in the United States are very happy with the current insurance. So when we look at the ACA, which is a wonderful achievement by Barack Obama, let's talk about a public option for that, so that anybody who wants to can have the public option. But individuals who are happy with what they have, let them have it. So I just think it's moderation, and there are clearly several candidates who, or what I would call moderate candidates in the Democratic group.
Here's a question. How do we raise the burden of evidence needed going from a phase 1-2 to a phase 3 trial? Too many failed due to surrogate endpoints that aren't meaningful.
I think that's a very good point, which is one reason why we do so many phase 1 and phase 2 clinical trials, because you really need to validate your target. You really need to validate your target as much as you can. You have to de-risk it, because you can cure a lot of mice with cancer, and that doesn't translate to the human. So what we're doing at Dana-Farber is to set up a particular assay that uses human tumor cells and human immune cells that we get from our patients when we do a biopsy. And we can use those mini organs for testing a whole bunch of drugs, so that we know that Mrs. Jones is likely to respond to drug A or B or new drug C that hasn't been tested yet, but she's not going to respond to drug X. so that we make the right diagnosis at Dana-Farber. We put patients on the right treatment. That's because we're a dedicated cancer hospital, and we have enormous expertise in both common and rare cancers.
I'm going to ask you one last question, because we only have about 30 seconds left. If a pile of money fell in your lap today, where would you put it? Where should it go?
I would put it in cancer early detection, because if we can detect your cancer early, we can cure it. So we just launched a center for early detection of cancer. We are focusing as well on inherited cancers. 10% of cancers are inherited. Those individuals do not need to develop cancer. We should know that they have or do not have the genetic mutations. So Judy Garber is a breast oncologist, and she is now asking for all women of Eastern European Jewish origin, because 1 in 40 of us have that mutation. Please come in. Let us test you for that. Come in when you're young, because then we can monitor you. We can monitor you. You can have the decision whether you want to have surgery, but we're going to do mammograms on you, and very, very detailed mammograms on you, ultrasound or whatever, to make sure we catch your breast cancer or your ovarian cancer at stage 1 when we can cure it.
Dr. Glimcher, thanks so much for your time today.
You're very welcome.